Hello, everybody. Welcome to a kind of impromptu episode of Game Wisdom Live. It's a Saturday chat this time. For those of you who are watching these plays live, we have been doing these usually on Thursdays. But hello, everybody. Welcome to kind of impromptu episode. There we go. Don't worry. Thanks to the power of editing and no one on, we'll just erase that last part. All right. Let's start over in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everybody. This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Welcome to a kind of impromptu episode of Game Wisdom Live. We're doing it on a Saturday afternoon. As you know, this week I originally spoke with Plastic Games. We had a very lengthy chat, but not as long as we had the last time. And thanks to the wonders of scheduling and getting times together, we have another cast or another discussion for you today. For those of you watching this recorded on YouTube, it will probably be about a week or so, maybe a little less than that since we talked. But let's welcome my guest from Voyage. We spoke on a podcast, I believe, a few months ago. Please welcome Robert Leach.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Rob.
Thanks, Josh, for having me here. This is always a blast.
Not a problem. This is going to be, I think, our first live chat as well. So
Yeah.
it's always fun when we do these things live. Gotta get myself situated just right. There we go. And for anyone watching this live right now, if you have any questions for us or like to comment, feel free, as the Twitch chat is right there in the bottom left. So, I guess to get things started with, for people who didn't listen to our cast, if you mind, just giving a little introduction about yourself, Rob, feel free.
Sure. I co-founded Voyage a few years ago with my business partner, Colin Sullivan. And I've been in the business for 15 years myself, doing everything. I started in QA, a lot of us had, of course. I worked at Visual Concepts, who is now basically their game is 2K, NBA 2K. That is their big title of late. THQ Wireless, they're no longer around. I've done stints at Disney. I've done stuff with educational games. I've done stuff with installations in a Vegas showroom for a game show we did, and a cruise ship. Vegas, I was there for 2 months. A cruise ship was 6 weeks, so I've had a rough run of things, obviously. But yeah, we've done a couple of indie games. We've got Reassembly out. That was a couple years ago. That one's doing well, and we are very proud of that one. Same with Zavix Tower. We were working with Chris at Bathlith Games, and I love that kind of game. And I've always enjoyed playing Zavix Tower, so I highly recommend it. And then we've got Venture Forth coming out in mid-January. When we were on the podcast before, it was coming out in October, November, but the Steam gauntlet of sales pushed us to January. So that's when we're going to launch. We're going to launch it at $9.99, which is a 33% discount. So we're looking forward to that.
Cool. I know when we last spoke, I think we kind of did talk about the RPG genre. I thought I mentioned Etrian Odyssey, I think, to you, or I could have been to Chris at the time. But I'm also a big fan of those kinds of dungeon crawlers, and I'm trying to find another one of those kinds of games to play, since I played Zavix Tower. Still waiting on Etrian Odyssey, whenever they're going to make another one of those. And so Venture Forth was pushed back, you said, till January?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. I know for those of you watching this, either live or recorded, we did Building the Game segments on both Zavix Tower and Ventured Forth. They are currently archived on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel, so be sure to check those out. And we had a lot of fun with those games. So for you guys at Voyage, are you working on, or are you publishing any other games at the moment?
Yeah, there's one that's at the moment we are just keeping it under wraps until we start the whole marketing campaign. But look for it to appear on Greenlight and itch.it, or is it IT? No, CO or something like that. I wish I could remember the website name, but we'll be having a free demo out. It's a very cool game. I'm really looking forward. It involves mechs and futuristic stuff like that. I really like the premise. I really like the gameplay, so I'm very excited about that one.
Awesome. Can't wait to check it out when the time comes. Do you have any rough estimate for when you'll reveal more about it?
Yeah, it will be early January. We are looking for a mid-year Kickstarter,
Hmm.
and then a 2018 launch. So we're very excited. We want to get that Kickstarter rolling,
Hmm.
get those guys some really top-notch artists and an assistant programmer
Hmm.
to just really nail that game. We're going to have probably most of the core game done by then, so we have a lot to show off
Hmm.
with art examples and so on, so people can really understand what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, definitely important. Is this going to be like your first kind of like Kickstarter like title that you're going to be working on?
no, we actually kickstarted both
Okay.
Reassembly and Venture Forth. Reassembly was a successful Kickstarter.
Hmm.
Venture Forth was not. That was a lessons learned
Hmm.
kind of Kickstarter. So onward and upwards, as
Yeah.
always. With Venture Forth, we are lucky in that Jeremy could continue the development without too much funding. We had to push back the launch date, of course, but um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely tricky these days with Kickstarter. I mean, again, that's an easy hour long topic, I think, between the two
yeah.
of us, but it has certainly changed. I'm not hearing as much on the indie Kickstarter front as I did like about a year, maybe 2 years ago. We're still seeing games, but
Mhm.
it is becoming a lot harder to pitch your game these days.
Oh my gosh. And that spills over into just Steam sales in general. The platform, even since reassembly, everything has changed so much that, in terms of selling on Steam and
Hmm.
indie game and in terms of marketing your game, it's just you're a drop in the bucket
Yeah.
of content that's out there and just excellent content. You're getting better and better developers and artists coming out of school
Hmm.
knowing how to just get a game out there in a professional manner. So
Yeah.
you're competing against all these people who really know what they're doing, who have a great vision. And when you have a great vision too, but you're only a staff of one, that makes things
Yeah.
extra difficult.
Hmm. And like speaking about Steam sales, we just finished up at this time of this recording, or I'm sorry, stream. I think the Thanksgiving sale for Steam has finally ended, and that means we're now going to get ready for the Christmas and winter sale in about
Yeah.
maybe 3 4 weeks from now.
Yeah. And so like you had the end of October, you had the Halloween sale, and then
Hmm.
you had the autumn sale, and now you got the winter sale, all in the span of less than 3 months,
Hmm.
which just is painful when you're trying to get your game's name out there.
Hmm.
I mean, going on sale is really great, especially if you can discount a good deal.
Hmm.
But it's just so much stuff out there, and as a consumer, it's fantastic.
Hmm.
And like you can take $20 and go into that Steam sale and come out with 5 to 10 games if you want to. Uh, and some of them being like just either vastly discounted AAA titles from yesteryear
Hmm.
or just excellent indie titles that you've always wanted. But it just is amazing what you can get as a consumer these days.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I was telling people the other day I broke down. I bought the PlayStation 4 for Black Friday, and now I'm just slowly getting the games that I want and hopefully being able to do more streams and videos of them. Right now, I am on the edge of my seat waiting for my copy of Bloodborne to get here, and then that will be the project for a little bit.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Hmm. Now, I guess to start off with, I'm sure this will span any number of topics. I figure we're going to talk about some of the games we've been playing lately. I know you were telling me in email that you just picked up Planet Coaster.
Yeah.
I want to ask you how that game is.
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is a genre that I've always liked. Roller Coaster Tycoon, way back to theme park.
Ah, yes.
Is that what it was called? Yeah.
Yeah.
From Bullfrog, way back when. Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, Tycoon 3. And then I was all excited when Roller Coaster Tycoon World was coming out, and vastly disappointed when I picked it up in early access. However, like when you get early access of Roller Coaster Tycoon World, it is painfully obvious that it's barely an alpha, or at least it was. I have to check it out again.
Hmm.
But the two competing products out there at the time were Parkitect and Planet Coaster. And Parkitect is just I know people use this term a lot, but it's a love letter to Roller Coaster Tycoon of old.
Yeah.
Mostly one and two. It's got the isometric view. It's just got all of those very basic concepts in there. They add a couple more, which makes it really interesting in terms of how your support staff works. But Planet Coaster just takes everything to the next level. It's so amazing what you can do and what people have done with the tools available. Like you can recreate some of the famous theme parks out there, and people have, and they've been more than creative, of course, with the coasters they've made. I recommend just going to YouTube and looking at it. It blows your mind.
Yeah, and I tried a little bit of Parkitect out. I've been trying to get a press copy for Planet Coaster, but they are just full there. It sounds really interesting. I guess here's a question for you. When you consider games like Theme Park, Theme Hospital, stuff like that, do you call them bullfrog simulators? Or like, because there's always been that debate about like what's like the correct term or the correct genre for these kinds of games.
I've never really delved into that too much. The ones I really like, I just call them theme park games. But then again, the sim genre in general is something I'm into. Bullfrog's games had a very distinct look and feel, and I really liked the humor they put into them too. Like one of my favorite aspects of theme park is when you lost, your guy would basically jump out the window of his thing, and then you realize he's on the first floor because he just picks himself back up again. It's this just really dark, sinister humor that goes along with it. And in those days, I don't remember if Theme Park did this or if it was just Roller Coaster Tycoon, when you could just have an incomplete ride or a dangerously built ride that would just actually kill your people and the people in the park. And that was also very macabre, but for whatever reason, it's just so fun to play with.
Yeah, with Parkitect, I tried creating one of those myself, and just because I missed the alignment by like one tile, it comes around the corner, and basically I create like a little ramp. The car just goes flying off. I'm like, oh my god, I just killed that person. But fortunately, this was like Alpha 1 or Alpha 2, so like they didn't model deaths yet. But he's just like the car just like fly off, spin in the air, and then crash.
Yeah, it's so fun to do that. It's so like oddly rewarding for some reason.
Oh yes. I guess with Planet Coaster, how are you finding it like so far? I've heard people say that a few of my friends said that it's very impressive, but they were having some trouble with the UI. Like, how's the UI for the game?
It's really powerful, but it can get complex. The like path completion tool is very tough to use, and I had to switch to grid based for a lot of it just to control it. Now they have a very winding, like you can kind of freeform paths, which is very nice.
So just like a curve, stuff like that, which I'm trying to simulate with my hand, of course.
Yeah, but it's very clumsy to use, especially when you're trying to connect very nearby paths. But the fact that you can do that, the curved paths, the slow gradient upward paths, and you can just tell all the stuff that they're going to fix and improve on in the future. And I imagine that's one of them. But we'll see. It seems like they've got a lot of room to put in just some amazing content.
And right now, is it considered out like 1.0, or is it still in early access?
That's something it's not in early access as far as I know. I'd have to pull it up. Actually, I have Steam open right here. Let's do some.
Me too.
We can both look like that we're not paying attention at all to the podcast.
It's not in early access anymore, according to this.
Yeah, I believe that, and I do know that the early access part of it was still way more complete than early access Roller Coaster Tycoon World. Same with Parkitect. It's got a very complete experience. Let's see. Does it have a version?
I think it's version, I saw 1.02 maybe?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it is a very complete game. It's just, there's so much to do, and the way you create like the environment is so powerful. Like you can put a tree on anything. So you can have a giant oak tree growing out the top of your ride. What I did was I put a bunch of bushes on the sides of my park entrance. Like you can put anything on the side of anything else and just add so much like topsy-turvy buildings. And if you're creative enough and like have enough time to really make it happen, you can have floating islands in the middle of your park. It's
Nice.
pretty cool.
And that's one of like those very interesting topics. I'm sure we can even talk about here. How it is very challenging when you have very powerful editors to try and break that down for a new person.
Hmm.
Um, Another good example would be Kerbal Space Program. Have you played that
Oh
one?
gosh. Yeah, I dabbled in that
Yeah.
one, and unless you, I mean, I didn't want to put a lot of time in when I first loaded it,
Hmm.
and it was just very imposing.
Hmm.
So I have to go back to it because I mean, it is ludicrous. Like just looking at it, you can say, "Oh my God, the possibilities here are
Hmm.
just endless."
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting time to spend on that game someday, but it'll be a while.
Yeah. That's the same thing for me. I mean, pretty much my rock experience is the rock going like this, like up curve and then back down again to the ground. And it is very challenging again with these powerful UIs to properly display that to a new player because they pretty much give you everything from the get go. And there's always that interesting debate about how much you want to give someone, especially in a free form game, in terms of what you want to start them off with. Because if you give them too little, then you're going to annoy people saying, "Oh, all the fun stuff's locked." But if you put too much, it's like I've had that, like that deer in the headlights, where you load it up and you have the entire like left hand side of the screen full of commands, UIs, building apparatuses. It's like, what the hell am I supposed to do with all this?
Right. It's like opening Unity, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you have all these tools or even Adobe Photoshop. It's
Mm-hmm.
just so much stuff to use and the learning curve is so high, but once you get it, so rewarding at the same time.
Yeah. The challenge, of course, is just getting to that point of familiarity with it. And tutorials with these kinds of games can be very tricky to manage, again, because you just never know what you want to show the player first. And we can easily talk about the number of grand strategy games as examples of that. Like I've talked about this multiple times already, but every time I load up a game like Stellaris, Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis, it's again I stare. I'm like, what the hell am I looking at here? I push a button, something happens. I'm like, now what? And then I just like back away slowly from those games.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. I'm trying to remember, like Galactic Civilizations was one of those for me. I got in and the just the sheer scope of what you can accomplish in that game. Um, yeah, it's like you just said, you kind of look and then you slowly back out like Homer into the bushes. You know,
Yeah. One of the games I've been trying to like play, or a genre I really want to see more of, would be sort of like the. I'm not even sure how we would describe this. Have you ever played the game Hinterland from Tilted Mill back in the day?
no, I haven't. I mean, I've seen
Mhm.
stuff on it. I have not. I'm not super familiar with it.
It's a city builder meets an action RPG. So the idea is you build your settlement up, and then you go into the wilderness, you fight monsters, you bring the gear and the stuff back to outfit your villagers, make them better their job, and you can have them come out into the field with you to fight. And it kind of combined like the city building side with ARPG. Another example of this would be the game Dark Cloud for the PlayStation 2, I believe, where
Yeah,
you have like the settlement and then you do quests and stuff and then you go back and you build your town up using the stuff you collected. And I really want to see more games that do that. I could even think like going way back to like titles like ActRaiser for the Super Nintendo, which was pretty much you had the 2D hack and slash segments, and then you go to this like isometric, very light city builder to construct your town.
that's very cool.
Literally an hour before the stream, I downloaded the demo for Dragon Quest Builders for the PlayStation 4, which
Ooh,
people were telling me is very similar to that kind of. You have like the field, you fight monsters, but then you actually build your town up and you're trying to construct a settlement for it.
yeah, that's cool. Suikoden 2 was one of the first ones that I
Mm.
experienced that you don't have much say in how your town gets built,
Hmm.
but as you pick up your NPC players, like people you can take out to fight with, so they're
Hmm.
NPCs most of the time, but then you can take them out in your party.
Yeah.
It just grows your town more and more and more, and you
Hmm.
can get like a chef in there and have like an Iron Chef challenge. So it opens up the game like that. And I always find that very interesting. And yeah, I remember Dark Cloud, and I have Dark Cloud 2 sitting downstairs
Yeah, me too.
gathering dust.
Hmm. But yeah, I would love to see more games that try to do that with bringing like the ARPG elements to the city building.
Hmm.
Because I find that with a lot of, at least with modern day city building, it does become very one note quickly. Like, have you played like any of the recent Anno games?
No, I haven't.
Ah, do you know what Anno is?
Oh, yeah. I sorry, it's overly excited for a second. Yeah, I played Anno when it. Oh God, what was it?
Yeah, they
Uh,
have really weird number conventions for
yeah,
that.
I remember playing it, but it was one of those where it forced you to be online and join a community and stuff. So it took me like 30 minutes to get through that
Hmm.
rigmarole. And at that point, I was like, I'm not, I'm not
Hmm.
feeling it right now.
Hmm.
But it did interest me off the bat because of everything you said. I was very interested in trying it out.
Yeah. And like the Anno games, like the last one, I want to say 2205. Like they have again, for those of you who don't know, the Anno, what they do is their numbers will always add up to nine. So they have like 1503 or 14 something like that, and then 20 70 was another one. Then their last one was 2205. And the last one they did was they made like an almost an open world city builder. So you had complete freedom to build, and it was just about every time you get enough people, it unlocks your corporation level, which unlocks new stuff. And they have different regions to build your people around or your settlements to. I love the idea of it, but they streamlined so much of like the micro level, trying to bounce it's hard to come with like easy examples for these kinds of things, but like doing more complexity with like logistics, like how to
Mm.
set up. I have like my food plants over here. I want to transform them to my factories over here, and then get them to my people over here. All that stuff was just removed, and it just made so I'm just putting buildings down. And there's just no real, I guess, like interaction between them. Kind of similar to like city skylines or yeah, that's it. Like the last one of those where it's more about just like watching things go rather than you building this very interesting and involved model. Like there's a lot of complexity on the simulation side, but not with what you're doing specifically.
Yeah, and I always bring this up, and I don't care who I'm talking to, but I always work this into a conversation. Is Dwarf Fortress
Hmm.
in the complexity and craziness that you lay out your fortress, and
Hmm.
that's always been something I really love. They do it a little differently than a sim, and there is a little bit of fish tank watching
Hmm.
involved, but you do design and watch them build it, and that's actually a big part of the gameplay is balancing what you can build, given how many dwarves you have, what their supplies are, and all that stuff,
Hmm.
uh, and how the world impacts your ability to continue building.
Hmm. Did you ever get into the God game genre, Rob?
Oh gosh, here and there. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember one that would even apply. But I would say only on the surface, very little.
Hmm. Yeah, that genre definitely hasn't seen too many things these days. We've seen like more like building dungeons, the bullfrog simulators that we just talked about. I tried out Goddess, and it was just horrible game there. Just did not work out at all in terms of what they were
Yeah.
going for. But yeah, it hasn't really seen too many things. I remember the big announcements around Black and White in the early thousands, and then no, that game just did not. It lived up to those expectations.
Yeah, yeah, that does. I mean, I don't know if Spore fits into this category.
Hmm.
It does kind of, but that was another one of those that was a little overblown and very disappointing.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I didn't play that until at least a few years after everything's died down, but I would agree with that. I spoke with Chris Hecker, who was one of the designers on it, like a
oh,
few
cool.
years ago when he was talking more about Spy Party at the time. But it was definitely an issue. Like again, it's very hard to talk about these things because we don't have like firsthand knowledge. But you could
Yeah,
see that the idea was there, but it just seemed to be just too overblown. Like they were trying to do too much. And it's kind of interesting, like when we, in that same breath, we talk about a game like Civilization, and it's literally trying to chart human evolution or
hmm
civilization evolution from Stone Age to modern.
yeah, and that's always a tough thing to do because it can't be entirely historically accurate, which I'm
Hmm.
sure bugs a lot of people. I mean,
Hmm.
you gotta lean towards fun gameplay,
Yeah.
and then you make a lot of assumptions as to how things happen and what has to come before something else.
Hmm.
Uh, and I do enjoy Civilization, but there's always that part of me that's like, I don't think that's how it works. But then again, I don't know how it works either.
Hmm.
So I would not be any more successful by far.
Yeah. And that's easily another topic there about that balance between abstraction and realism, or even abstraction and player skill, which I've talked about so many times at this point. But I remember this is an example I talked about. I remember reading the developer log or the postmortem that Sid Meier wrote for Sid Meier's Pirates, and he
Oh
talked
yeah,
about the. Oh yeah, I love that game too.
yeah.
And he talked about how they were originally going to add scurvy as one of the things you had to
Oh
manage with
my
your
God.
ships. And he said to himself, that is a real part of piracy back in the day, but would it really add anything to the game?
hmm
And they basically decided to make a reduction on the mantle for fun rather than realism.
Yeah, I can see going from town to town buying crates of oranges and limes.
Yes. And again, it's always that balance between just how much you want to make these things realistic. And the same would be said of like the RPGs. Like when we talk about games
hmm
like Zavix Tower, Etrian Odyssey, and any of those other dungeon crawlers. I mean, you could get really down to the weeds there in terms
Yeah,
of, managing food, emotional distress. Have your
yeah.
character slept enough?
hmm
But there's
And
always that question. It's realistic, but does it really add to the experience?
and I feel like that has bled into the survival
Mm-hmm.
horror games, in which all of that realism is basically pitted against you just surviving.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where they focus on that kind of thing. But you're absolutely right. When you're dealing with RPGs, and I think, again, towards the same survival thing,
Mm-hmm.
roguelikes try to do that as well. But yeah, you have to kind of suspend some disbelief. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're way down on health, you're probably not going to be fighting as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't really do that. You have a very powerful character. You worked really hard to bring
Mm-hmm.
them up there. If you're down on health, you want that ability to kind of come back and still win the
Mm-hmm.
battle.
Yeah.
And if you were, if you had limbs hacked off and stuff, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Have you played any of like the recent survival-based games, Rob?
The ones that I really like tend to be a little more cartoony and whatnot. I'm trying to remember. I always forget the name of the one that I really liked.
Slime Rancher, maybe?
No, it's oh gosh, why can't I remember this? I am so bad at remembering names. It's impossible.
Welcome to
Don't
the
Starve.
club there. Oh, yes.
Don't Starve. Yeah, that's one I've always enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very cartoony, but also fairly difficult to get through as
Mm-hmm.
many like several days.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's expanded so much that I really need to revisit it.
Oh,
And they've
yes.
added, they have new content. They've got a new, as far as I know, they just keep adding plugins
Yeah, they have
or updates.
multiplayer now. There's sea exploration. Um, a while ago, I spoke with the lead designer. I think this was like first year Game Wisdom. he like talked about like there at some point they would love to do like space exploration. I don't think they ever got that far in the game, but it certainly has grown. Yeah, I have to revisit that at some point too. I'm really excited about Clay's next game, Oxygen Not Included. Have you heard of that one
Ooh,
yet?
I have not.
It's their take on Dwarf Fortress.
Oh,
Interestingly.
that's always a tough thing to do. I
Hmm.
know a lot of people have tried, and
Hmm.
the depth Dwarf Fortress has taken on in a decade of development
Yeah.
um, is hard to accomplish in just a couple of years. Although the more powerful tools that exist now
Hmm.
enable you to do pretty well, especially with regards to world generation and historical generation as well.
Yeah, they announced it like during Sony's E3 conference last year or 2016 at this point, and pretty much I saw it for like 5 cents. Like, okay, I won't buy this now. Come on,
Yeah.
release it now, Clay. Let me know. I They're probably going to do another, I guess, soft early access like they did with Don't Starve and Invisible Ink. And I keep checking the page and it's not letting me play it, so I don't know what's going on there. There must be a bug on that on that store page. Well, I was mentioning a few minutes ago. Have you heard of the game Slime Rancher?
Again, I feel like I've heard of it, but no, I don't know anything about it.
It's a more, I would kind of say it's like a survival game for kids almost. You're managing like a fantasy farm where you cultivate these slimes, and they have like different personalities, different food, and you're just trying to basically keep them alive and use your resources to build your little ranch up. It's very lax. There's no hunger mechanics. There's health, but there's no you die and your game's over kind of thing.
Right.
It's definitely more like I said, it's aimed for kids, but it feels like it's a good game. I think they still need to add more elements to make you want to keep playing it, but it's certainly coming along nicely. I was trying Subnautica out a few months ago, which is basically you're on water world and you have to survive. So you have to manage food, um, water, health, of course, and it all takes place under the sea. So you're building like an undersea little habitat. There's like
Cool.
giant shark-like monsters that can grab you. They've been building that up for I think a few years now, so I'm not sure when that one will get done. I did try. Did you hear the game The Long Dark by any chance?
Again, it's one of those. I've
Yeah.
heard of a lot of games, but I don't know exactly. I just looked at Slime Rancher, by the way. That is looks pretty cool. A
Yeah.
little collection gun, a little vacuum.
The
Uh,
Long Dark is kind of like Man versus Wild almost kind of thing. Like you're in like the a winter wilderness and you have to survive. And that one
mhm.
goes, the super hardcore, you step the wrong way, you get a splinter or, get attacked, you have your arm gets broke, you now have
Oh
to
my
craft
God.
a sprain, but now your body temperature is too low, so you have to get indoors. But then you need to get enough wood, but wait, now you need to get you gotta find thread and a needle in order to stitch a scar, stitch
Oh
your
my
arm
God.
up. But oh no, wait, now you're dead because you didn't cook your food right, and now you got
Oh my
food
God.
poisoning. And then the wolves show up just out of nowhere.
And then the wolves show up. That's always a good way to end a game.
Hmm.
Then the wolves show up.
But I haven't played too much of that because again, it is one of those games that's just very hard to get into. And it goes back to again that kind of the balance of accessibility. Like how much do you really give the player to start off with? Tutorial design has been a topic that I have harped on so much these days, but it is very hard to design a good tutorial for these games. Because again, you just never know how do you approach one of these games from, zero. Like what
Yeah.
do you tell someone? Oh, my voice just completely went out. Which is not good because this is live, so I can't edit out all my drinks.
Yeah, I've just been drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point. I just to bring back Planet Coaster, it was funny
Hmm.
because I'm like, all right, let's get through this tutorial. And then you get into the game, there's no tutorial.
Yeah.
It says, "Would you like to watch a video?" And then it'll take you to their like YouTube page, and you can watch video tutorials.
Hmm.
But it's not as cool as being able to do it in game. I don't want to read something over here and then go back to the game
Oh yeah.
and try to replicate what I just saw.
Oh my goodness,
So I
yes.
just dove in and I'm like, okay, I'll figure this out. I know enough about how this is supposed to work.
That's what we always say, right? I can
Yeah,
figure this out. This is easy. I can Kerbal Space Program. I don't need background rocket science. Let me just put fins on this metal thing and shoot it up and see what happens.
yeah, and there are games certainly, and I imagine the Long Dark. I'm watching the video here is one of them where you need like a cheat sheet to
Hmm.
just get you started.
Hmm.
Like, okay, you're in this world. It's open world. You have no clue what you can do except what you might have seen in the videos, and you're like, okay, do I not start with anything? Do I have to build everything? Do I have to find
Hmm.
like a rock and then kill an animal and then get leather and tie the rock to a stick to make an axe?
Mm.
It's like, what do I need to do to just kind of kick things off?
Yeah.
And that is, I think that's the thing that people really need more than anything is just that initial boost
Hmm.
of an idea of where to start, not necessarily a right way or a wrong way,
Just
but
like a
just
checklist, basically.
mhm.
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. Just something to get you going. I've talked about this multiple times on posts and podcasts, but for me, the three things I always need to know are what am I doing, how do I do it, and then why do I do it? And
Yeah.
that's always that trick because, again, when you have an open game like The Long Dark or even something like Dwarf Fortress, it's like, how do I explain this to someone who's never looked at this game before?
Yeah.
And that learning curve has been just a killer for me for a lot of these different games and for especially for the grand strategy genre. And
Hmm.
I wanted to mention this before I forget. You were talking about that challenge of flipping back and forth. Have
Hmm.
you ever tried learning like the war game genre?
Um,
Stuff
I,
like Steel Panthers or the quote unquote Grognard games.
the war genre is one of those that's just kind of evaded me a little bit, even in board games. I only deal with very light war gaming. Um, like I knew a guy who designed a board game that was a war game, and I helped him test it out a little
Hmm.
bit. And just the number of things you have to track, it's just not something that I haven't played any of the Civil War games or like any of the real strategy-based World War II games or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, it it is an interest unto itself. It's like I
Hmm.
feel it's separate from a like a normal gameplay, where it's a little lighter and it is, as you say, abstracted.
Hmm.
This is abstracted in very specific ways, but you
Yes.
still need to have like you still need to know, okay, these are my numbers over here on this flank. Here's like how long it will take me to get around on this side. What is my likelihood of winning against a certain number of other people?
What's
Um,
the tank armor measurement in inches or for which side of the tank I'm hitting? What kind of ammo I'm using? I
yeah,
tried
range.
learning one of those a long time ago, and instead of having an in-game tutorial, it had a tutorial in the manual which you had to play the tutorial scenario at the same time. You had to flip between the two in order to try and learn it. So it's like manual says, okay, click here, move unit 3 spaces. Okay, Alt tab out, go over to the game, move unit 3 spaces. Okay, now Alt tab, go back to the manual. Now press the weapon. And I'm like, after like 5 minutes, I'm like, yeah, no, we're done here. This is not going to be happening here.
Yeah, it's strange because a lot of that tutorial stuff you just need in a pop-up text box.
Hmm.
And not to say that that's the easiest thing in the world to go through and time correctly and check that the person is either doing these actions or not. But a tutorial like that, if you really just want someone to follow some instructions, you can just use text boxes and just give suggestions at
Hmm.
the very least.
Yeah. And we talked about this on another cast at one point, but just the genius of a game like Plants vs. Zombies in terms of
Mm.
teaching. I spoke with Mark Venturelli, who did Star Vikings, and he talked about how he was influenced by the sort of tutorial philosophy of Plants vs. Zombies when building his game up, and about trying to essentially use everything that you have to make the tutorial as seamless as possible. He talked about like how you don't want to have more than I think like 12 words in a single dialogue box, making things very visual, so you can see like when you click on you can see exactly his attack range. You can see the
Hmm.
squares. Like you leave nothing for the player to guess. They know exactly what's going to happen at any given time whenever they make an action.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it is a tough thing. I noticed that we have a just chat talking about the long dark,
Hmm.
and yeah, that's another thing to notice. Like mapping,
Yeah.
uh, it's its own kind of tracking device. It's not quite a tutorial, but it's a UI feature
Hmm.
that I know it's strangely absent in a lot of games. Certainly RPGs have grown towards including that kind of thing. And there are in a lot of those war games, there's the battle map where you can kind of just the whole thing is in essence its own map, but
Hmm.
just to have a quick little thumbnail of the environment so you can kind of see. Um,
Hmm.
and that goes to real time strategy as
Oh yeah,
well.
the mini map has been a vital part of the RTS genre. I was trying to think. Yeah, the kind of like being able to get that overview I think is very useful for these kinds of games. Like understanding, okay, I have resources coming in. Where are they coming from? Now I have my army. What's my army composition? Like
Hmm.
an easy way to see, okay, this blob of units here is made up of 30 Minutemen, 20 cavalry, 5 cannons.
Hmm.
And just having that information be available, like there's always that risk between giving the player too much information. That's actually a really good question I want to ask you, Rob.
Yeah.
What do you think is that line between giving the player so much information that the game is playing itself versus giving them just enough that they can kind of infer these choices? They're not being told outright, you need to build a farm here, here, and here, but
Hmm.
being able to see, okay, I have so and so amount of food coming in. I need X amount of food. How do I do it? Kind of like, how do I solve this problem?
Yeah, and I tie that into RPGs as well because it's a matter of what does a health bar really represent, except to tell you the closeness you are to dying without actually having any other visual cues.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Running out of ammo and that kind of thing. If you have a larger sim environment where you do have to track very specific amounts of resources, it depends. And I do this in sports games as well, where you can be an owner or a GM or a coach. I mean, certainly there are things that a coach would do that are
Mm-hmm.
very different from a GM, and it's in that same category. Are you the high end like Uber general? If so, you're not gonna know a lot of the minutia. But if you're on the level of a little squad commander, then you might know exactly how much ammo you have and what kind of resources you
Mm-hmm.
have to train your little group. So giving people the full amount of information at all times, having all that access
Mm-hmm.
from a high level standpoint is I feel like there's an added set of difficulty to kind of have to infer, and I think that's a strategy unto itself.
Yes.
And having at least that option in a game would be very valuable to give yourself, okay, how much visibility do I actually want in this game to challenge myself?
Yeah. A really good example of that I liked was Age of Empires 3 from back in the day.
Hmm.
And what they did was you could control the amount of information the tooltips would give you. So you could have a basic tool that just says, um, unit has 15 attack, 20 health, costs 30 gold. You could go further and say, unit has 25 health, has a movement speed of 3, does bonus damage towards cavalry, weak against archers. And you can even go like further. You can break it down, saying his attack is 15.3. If he upgrades this whole game, plus 2.4 damage.
Hmm.
And that kind of like detail in the tooltips I thought was very interesting. I want to say Rise of Nations did that as well, but it's been a long time since I last played that one. But
Hmm.
I think being able to, I guess, break the information down, like as you just said, like the high level versus the low level. Like, here's like the highest level. This is the stuff I need to know at all times. And
Yeah,
it's like, okay, now let's say I want to dig a little bit more deeper. Let's get down to this level, and then so on and so forth. I think Civilization has been doing all right with that. You have the main screen that gives you all the information you need about what's going on, but then if, let's say you want to click exactly on your happiness screen, you can see now, okay, what's causing all the happiness, what's causing people to be unhappy,
hmm,
and then break things down further. But the information is repeated because it's relevant to that specific screen.
yeah.
And oh my goodness, we could easily spend another hour like talking about like UI design, just like how important that main screen
Oh my
is.
gosh. Yeah, UI is such a minefield. It is a pain. And when you're, again, a thought that occurred to me with war games is there's a difference between the preparation and the actual activity. It seems like the preparation you can know as much as you want, but as soon as the activity starts, it's a lot more chaotic.
Yeah.
And representing that chaos could be a pretty cool and fun mechanic.
hmm And again, like just being able to reveal all this information to the player just gets very tricky. Because
Yeah.
again, like with the UI, oh my goodness, I've written more posts than I can remember about UI design. It's such a in-depth topic, and
Yeah.
there's just so many different parts of it. Like, one of the things that I liked as a really good example of a UI was City Skylines, and what they
Hmm.
did was feature a dynamic UI. Like every time you click on something, the screen would show you the relevant information, and that would go away when you move to something else. So,
Hmm.
like, if I build, or I'm sorry, if I click on fire departments and I see all the different fire options, it will
Yeah.
put an overlay on the actual game screen showing me all the areas that are being covered by fire, the high risk zones, where my fire stations are, like easily to show them. But then let's say I want to look at education. I click on a school, now the education overlay pops up. And I thought that was just a really powerful and very useful UI. But the
Yeah.
downside, of course, is I bet that was very complex for them to design a UI that will, again, just adapt to what I'm clicking on and what's showing.
Yeah, yeah, and there's the one game that I always felt was fascinating because it's almost entirely UI
Mm-hmm.
is Democracy. Uh,
Mm.
Democracy 3 in particular. It's just everything is represented by just a little circle,
Oh my
and
goodness,
it's like
yes.
one of those bulletin boards where you're tying
Mm-hmm.
strings together.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. It's you see a circle and what it's tied to,
Mm-hmm.
and how one decision will affect those relationships.
Mm.
And it's such a complicated uh, little engine that it's really all about managing each little segment. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it's entirely UI and it kind of removes the whole um, visual game
Yeah.
board feel, I think minimalizing that kind of thing is actually pretty cool as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I harken back to like the old school RPGs, like the Bard's Tales and such, where the game screen was this tiny little quadrant
Mm-hmm.
of the gameplay area. The rest is just character sheet.
Yeah.
I appreciate having that information in front of me and kind of minimalizing the game uh, screen experience. And I feel like a lot of war games can do that as well. Because again, when you're a general, you see a kind of an abstract map, and you kind of get updates every now and again of
Mm-hmm.
what's happening. So that kind of visual representation of what you actually know compared to what is actually going on, to abstract that and give the player a better feel for how that works,
Mm-hmm.
I think is very valuable, at least for me. I
Yeah.
really appreciate that kind of design.
Oh my goodness! I tried Democracy a few months ago in the Kerbal Space Program Europa Universalis Situation app. I'm like, what the hell am I looking at? I click something, I see numbers going up. I'm like, I need to phone Cliff Harris right now. I need him here to tell me what the hell is going on.
Hmm. Yeah, it would be handy for everyone to have a direct line into the designer and just say, "Hey, can you give me a couple hints?"
Yeah.
It's hard as a designer and developer to predict everything that the player needs because you're so close to the game and you know how it works so well.
Hmm.
If you don't do like a whole bunch of uh, like game testing and getting specific feedback along those lines from people who aren't familiar with your game, you might not be able to perfect it. And even if you feel like you've perfected it, there's gonna when you release it to thousands of people, there are going to be very specific complaints that you've never thought of and you never heard about.
Hmm.
So it's just impossible.
And that's the beauty of early access these days, and being able to get your game in front of everyone and just seeing what they're getting stuck at, what's going on. Now, of course, there is the challenge, of course, of getting people to play knows your game in the first place. And
Yeah,
again, that's another topic easily there. But
yeah.
but I've spoken to developers again. I spoke with Chris and Jeremiah. I spoke with Tim from Duskers. I forget his last name. Tim Keenan. There we go. And he talked about again the amount of value there was in getting all these people to look at his game. Because as you just said, Rob, when you're designing the game, you're in the trenches. You know how everything works. You don't need to. It just becomes an automatic response. But when you put in front of someone who hasn't been looking at this game for a year to 2 years, you're going to need their feedback in order to make your game as accessible as possible.
Yeah, and the early access part of things can be very tricky. We're finding that out with Venture Forth. Once you launch that game to early access, you have a day or two to really take advantage of people who want to play early access games. And if you miss that boat, you don't have feedback, and like it is slim to none. You might get a couple of people because it's always a percentage of people who buy your game
Mm-hmm.
that will give feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have reasonable numbers of purchasers, you're not going to have a reasonable number of people giving feedback, and
Yeah.
that's really important
Mm-hmm.
in early access. You expect people to do that, and they of course don't. I do the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. I don't comment as much as I should in early access, and that's on me. I feel like I could better represent a developer trying to get early access comments by simply commenting myself and practicing
Mm-hmm.
what I'm asking people to do.
Yeah. And again, and then when that doesn't happen, you get that negative feedback loop. You're not getting the people looking at your game, so you're not able to improve your game. So that when you finally launch it, then you have
Mm.
people complaining about the things that you should have found out about during early access.
Yeah, yeah. It's oh gosh, it's so tricky. This modern Steam in modern times is very hard just due to the huge number of games coming out on early access through Greenlight. Uh, it is to compete. And it's not even competing really. It's just being showcased amongst them. And
Mm-hmm.
and if you go to early access or if you launch at the same time, and you can't really predict this, at the same time as another game of a similar genre
Mm-hmm.
on the indie side, usually AAA companies will announce it and you can plan around that. But if another indie that just happens to be a little more appealing or have a bigger audience comes out or better reviews, even just as simple as that, you're kind of screwed. People are going to gravitate towards that, and unless you have a very competitive price, and by that I mean $5 or less, people are probably not going to buy yours as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's always very challenging because the one of the things that's good about like the indie market, or especially about game development as a whole, is that companies aren't directly competing with each other in the same way as Pepsi versus Coke or car manufacturers. But at the
Hmm.
same time, they're still indirectly competing with each other because we only have 24 hours in a day and so much money. And like you
Yeah,
just said, Rob, if I see a game, like for instance, if I see one game first I really like and I put my $10, $15 on, but then I spot another game, 5 minutes later, the chance of me buying that one, I'm gonna be like saying, well, I already spent my money on this one. I don't have the time to play two games, and that one just kind of falls by the wayside. And we are seeing more cases of games slipping through the cracks these days, unless they get, that lucky break, or maybe a big time YouTuber notices them.
Yeah, and that's we were lucky with that with reassembly. We had a great article on I believe it was rock paper shotgun, and that really helped us
Yeah.
by a lot. And if you don't get that notice, then you got to find other ways to get in front of people, like either in the 9.99 group or the 4.99 group, or $5 and less or $10 and less on Steam, because that's a whole other group of people who are looking for a value in a game. And I feel like over time, indies and new launches are going to start creeping down to those price points to get more notice. I do have a story that I'd like to tell about this very thing about pricing. This was back in like 2004. This is when I'm working at Visual Concepts.
Hmm.
Now, this was back when the NFL sports contract was open to a lot of AAA companies. And Visual Concepts was the number two NFL game. It was NFL 2K, X year. And of course, there was Madden. Madden's number one, and number one by a long shot.
Oh,
And
yes.
NFL games are some of the biggest sellers annually. So that's a huge amount of money that if you're not grabbing a significant percentage, then your company is not going to be doing as well. And Visual Concepts was on the verge of failing. And then the president, Greg Thomas, called everybody, and that included QA, included everyone in the company, into
Hmm.
one room. And he said, "Okay, this stuff is not going well. We've come up with a strategy,
Hmm.
and we're hoping it. We're crossing our fingers. We think it'll work. We think it's going to get us back on the map. We're going to sell our NFL game because these games were $60. They're all 60
I
bucks.
I know what you're about to say because I remember this myself.
We're going to sell this game for $20. It was either $20 or $30. I think it was 20. But and that's one of those things. We're taking a huge chance because if we don't get more sales, that's a third of our income gone. I'm sorry, it's two-thirds of our income gone. Um, but what wound up happening is we had a lot of Madden players buying both games because the price point was so low, and because of that, we outsold them copies wise, and got a lot of people switching over. And then 2 years later, EA suddenly comes up with this plan to get the NFL license only to themselves.
Hmm.
And I believe that was just trying to get rid of Visual Concepts because in every sport, and they're catching up in every sport, hockey, basketball, baseball, and they wanted to shut them down by taking off their biggest moneymaker. Now, when EA did this, they got rid of pretty much their whole budget for all their sports games to keep that going. And meanwhile, Visual Concepts is like, okay, we can't do football anymore, so we're just going to put all our effort into basketball. And they did that. They were super successful. EA basketball just again they had no budget. EA football
Yeah.
was famously like stale for years because they just didn't have the resources. So Visual Concepts decided, okay, we're going to make our basketball game awesome, and we're just going to grab all these people who are just sick of the EA basketball now. And they did, and they were super successful. So these weird price point strategies really can help in the long run. And it's a matter of really trusting that a lower price point is going to get you, like if you go down by a third, it'll get you a third more players. It'll get you enough more players to break
Hmm.
even at least. And that's a tricky and scary thing to do when you're a developer.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, and I remember that too. I actually bought a NFL 2K2 at that $20 price point because another part of that is also reducing the pricing barrier. Because again, if I'm a new player, if I've never touched a Madden game, if I've never touched one of these genres, I'm not going to be inclined to spend $50, $60 on those games because how do I know if I'm going to like them or not?
yeah,
And the lower you make that price, the lower that risk is. I mean, hell, raise your hand if you bought a game on Steam from a genre that you had no idea about just because it was like $3, $4.
yeah, totally.
And that's what I did with NFL 2K2. And even though that is pretty much the story that I say that there was a 1 month period in my life that I was into football, and that was because I played NFL 2K2 for 30 days. I was into football. I watched it on TV. I played it, and then after that 1 month, sorry, the the
You're like,
football genie left at that point. But with NFL 2K2, it was enough at that price point to get me interested enough to try it out. And
yeah,
again, as you said, if you launch it at $60, even if it was the best damn football game at that time, you were still competing directly with Madden.
yeah,
And again, when we're at $60, who not a lot of people have $120 to
yeah.
spend on two games, much less games like Madden 2K2, where you could spend a lot of time playing them. And there's, again, as you were saying, it's always that challenge of pricing. And my goodness, that's another who knows how long when it comes to pricing your game.
Yeah, and it was also an interesting point in gaming history because that's when network games and you could play with your buddy across the country. That's when it was first coming out.
Yes.
So if you miss that boat, if your friend's playing Madden, you're going to be playing Madden just to play with him. So if you don't get converts right away, you're going to completely miss out on that whole networking world and people loving to play against each other from afar.
hmm And this was also very interesting, still during that time where pricing was still considered a major statistic for a game's quality. For those of you watching this like today, during the pretty much from the 90s to the early thousands, games weren't on sale. You were spending 50, 60, 70, even $80 on a game because you knew about that quality. And games
Yeah.
that were cheaper were considered shovelware. You don't like we saw like games like your Kmart or your Target for like $10, and it's like some like budget game someone just like made in their spare time. And like when you saw a game like NFL 2K2, like I'm not. I guess here's a question for you: was there a challenge in terms of convincing people that this was the real deal? That you guys weren't just skimping on things to make it $20?
Well, we certainly had enough of a fan base
Mm-hmm.
to where they could help convince other people that it was worth it and it was a good value,
Mm-hmm.
because our fan base was, of course, very dedicated. And you do get when you're second place, you get a lot of fans just because they don't want to associate themselves with the
Big
behemoth,
dog,
evil
yeah.
behemoth. So in that regard, people already knew that we were a quality product. To come out at that price was groundbreaking. And certainly during that meeting, it was, I don't know if it was 50-50 or even worse, people excited about it and people dreading what would happen.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so it certainly was a huge stigma against lower priced games, as you say. And it was a very scary strategy, but it was lucky that it panned out. And luck is a tough thing to say because obviously it panned out. It was a perfect strategy, but yeah, back then, exactly what you say. Someone new to the game is going to be like, well, I mean, I would spend $20, but what if I get a janky product? Um,
Yeah, exactly. And there's also, from the development side of things, about how much you put into a game like this. And taking this back to the start with Hinterland, there's a famous story about the problems with Hinterland. Hinterland was one of those ideas that, quite frankly, it could have done a lot better. The genius is there, but the problem was this was released. I want to say 2005, 2006. It's been a very long time, but they were pitching it at a $20 price point, maybe like 2008. Now that I think about it, but
yeah,
$20 again, they were putting into this. They went into it thinking this was going to be a budget game. The graphics don't look good. The game is very bare bones because that's what they were expecting. They weren't expecting to make a $60 massive title. But what ended up happening is that you had people playing going, this is great, but there's just nothing there. And this was starting to be around that time where $20 was being handled differently. I mean,
yeah,
when you look at today, $20 is considered like premium for a lot of indie titles.
yeah,
Like people are expecting, like again, like what you put into NFL 2K2 for $20 back then, they're
yeah,
expecting that today for indie games.
yeah. And like I say, I mean, you got all these people graduating from these specialty schools who
hmm
really know game design from people who've done it, really know game art from people who've done it, and really know game writing and programming, because all of those are so unique unto themselves. If you go through and if you're like a great programmer and you go through a computer science thing and
Hmm.
you get straight A's and all this stuff, transitioning to games is still a huge undertaking because suddenly you're dealing with graphics, and graphics are a pain in the ass to deal with in any regard because there's vectors and just
Meshes and
yeah,
textures
and different resolutions and screen sizes. It's
and
just
don't
endless.
forget about if you want to have a unique art style. Let's say you want to
Mm,
make it a retro game or a watercolor aesthetic, or what Clay does with like that kind of like, I don't want to say cell shade, but like a comic book look.
yeah,
And and don't forget, of course, Rob, besides programming and art, you have to also think about design. How does
yeah,
your
yeah.
game work? Is it going to be an interesting title? Can I make something that people are going to want to play?
There's game design and UI design, which are so different,
Hmm.
such different skill sets.
When I spoke with the guys from Plastic Games a few weeks ago, we talked about the fact that the unique thing about a video game is that this is a product, but you're also having to add entertainment in to it, and
Yeah,
that just raises the complexity and the difficulty exponentially. Because it doesn't matter if your game looks amazing and there's no bugs, if no one likes your gameplay, what's the point then? And
yeah,
and these days, I mean, again, taking this full circle, because of how much the things have changed, you can have a game that looks very retro and still be a fantastic game. On
yeah.
the same hand, you can have a game that is using Unreal Engine 4 photorealistic graphics, and people hate it because the gameplay sucks.
Yeah, there's a dungeon crawler out there that was made, and I don't know what to call it, but it's certainly like shovelware is a great name for it. This was along, like, it would look like, if I'm going to compare it to Zavix Tower.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to find the name of the game because it was made by a company or a person who was very obviously pumping out just crappy games
Hmm.
and selling them at severely low prices. Like they would launch at 4.99 and go on sale for something like 80 cents. And so tons of people would buy it because, why not? It's 80 cents. And I bought the pack of his terrible games for like $4. And I felt, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. And yeah, you play it, and he's basically taken all this
Hmm.
pre-made 3D art and just shoved it into his game in a very stale map. But pre-made textures, pre-made 3D art, no animations to really speak of. A lot of particle effects, but then it's easy to add particles these days to like Unity. Um, and of course, there's effort that goes into even a crappy game, just like there's effort going into making a terrible movie or writing a terrible book. Accomplishing that is a feat unto itself. But when you have games like this, they can still make money and be terrible, terrible games to play and be a horrible experience and be riddled with bugs. But that price point is so important um, in considering all that.
Yeah. And as you go up in price, people are expecting more from your games. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, but it also becomes very challenging to pitch the value of your game. Like when
yeah,
you get into the 20 to $30 price range, you really have to sell your game. You have to tell people why exactly they should be spending this much money. And again, we talked like 10 years ago. If someone were to release a AAA game at $20, it doesn't even matter what that game is. People would buy it, going, "Oh my God, someone's releasing a $60 game for 20." And
yeah.
now these days, it's like, you expect me to pay $10 for your game? How dare you, sir?
Exactly. That price point is getting lower every year,
Hmm.
and and it really is driven, I feel, by the Steam sales,
Yeah.
because those sales discount everything so much that
Hmm.
I can say, well, I could buy this game, but if I waited a year, I could buy it at less than half of that price
Yeah, yeah.
and get incredible value for it. And it only is a year old. Certainly, I'm not jumping on the bandwagon now, but with people like me, and I'm sure you and a lot of other people, your libraries are so large and
Hmm.
full of unplayed games that if you really think about it, you can wait at least a year to purchase any game and really still have a ton of unplayed games on your library.
Definitely. I mean, good examples would be Doom from 20, the latest Doom game. It was
Yeah,
released at $60 in less than 6 months. It was down to like 35, $38. And I think for like the last Steam sale or for one of like the big holiday sales, it was down to $18. It's not even a year old yet, and it's down to
yeah.
$18.
I remember when I wanted to buy Paper Mario. I think it was the second one,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, okay, this was oh gosh, whenever it was launched, it wasn't that long ago. But I remember checking out. I'm like, okay, I'm really interested in playing Paper Mario, but I'm not interested in paying $60
Yeah.
right now. I don't have that kind of money. I'll wait. A year later, still $60. I'm like, okay, well, I'll keep waiting. A year later, it was still $60. Like Nintendo refused to bring down the value of that game,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually, I was just like, okay, it was like on sale for $10. I'm like, okay, I'll just buy it, and I loved playing it. It was a great game, but
Mm-hmm.
those older games were able to stick with that price point for so long, and now you can't because so much new content's coming out. People just don't care about older games.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. If we start talking about retro gaming now, we'll be here for another 2 hours. I
Yeah,
guess
that's
as a
true.
quick tangent regarding that, um, did you pick up or have any interest in that NES Classic that Nintendo just released like a few weeks ago?
I am super interested in getting it. I have not yet. But I'm the guy who during when for the PS2, I bought the Activision Arcade, which
Hmm.
I loved playing those older Atari games
Yeah.
on a PS2, which was ridiculous. But playing old NES games is fantastic too, and I'm looking forward to grabbing that at some point in the future.
Hmm.
Don't know when,
Yeah. Plus,
but
they
I
have to
would.
get back in stock too.
Yeah, of course, that's how it is around this time of year.
Hmm.
But I would love to see a a new something exactly like that with a bunch of games loaded on with the ability to play cartridges because going to something like there's a retro game show up here, just as I'm sure there are scattered across the country.
Hmm.
Uh, they have entire like tons of groups who are making old Atari games in television, Nintendo games, like using those old cartridges and challenging themselves to make real exciting gameplay with those limitations. And honestly, that some of that new content's really cool, and it'd be fun to be able to buy it and play it just at home without having to own a 30-year-old system. Well, yeah, 30 years old. My
Hmm.
God, I'm
Yeah.
old.
Yeah, me too. I've been dreaming about. I would love to see someone do what GOG did for PC gaming for console and retro gaming.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know. That seems more like a pipe dream at this point. But you never know. I mean, a few years ago, I thought GOG was going to be like a crazy thing that no one would ever do, and here we are. But again, if we start talking fully about retro gaming, I don't know how long we're going to be here for.
Right. Yeah.
Let me see. Time wise, I think we did spend about like 5 6 minutes before. I think we're just like a little bit over an hour and 15 into the stream.
Hmm.
I think we could probably start to wrap it up. I mean, again, we can jump onto any number of topics
Yeah.
easily. I guess
Next
before,
time.
yeah, before we wrap it up, then. Oh, well, Bluebird says old timers. Yeah, we're old.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up, for you, Rob, are there any topics that come to your mind that you would like to talk about or bring up?
Yes. 12 Days of Indie for the YouTubers. They might be missing it, but depends on if it's before the 12th. I know we're going to have a presence on the East Coast Tuesday morning at midnight, 12 a.m. So Monday night for those of us on the West Coast and central U.S.
Hmm.
Um, that actually it's ongoing. It's
Hmm.
for a great cause, Toys for Tots. Just go to Twitch and look up. I think it's Indie or something like that. If you just type in 12 Days of Indie, it'll come up,
Hmm.
and it's just people giving 2 hour windows, just playing whatever and showing off the games and just trying to gather money and funds. I think they're asking for like 15,000 or something. Oh, there you go. Bluebird put up the link. Um,
Hmm.
but it's just over $10,000, and they're looking to raise for Toys for Tots, and just go in, watch somebody's podcast or watch somebody's stream, and donate a couple bucks. I think it's a great cause, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And we are seeing more, I guess, in another tangent easily, but we're definitely seeing a lot more developers and streamers and stuff doing more with fundraising and these kinds of charities these days. I watched the Summer Games Done Quick a
I
few
love.
months ago.
Yeah.
There's, I think, the Extra Life Marathon that comes up sometimes. I think that's once a year too. I mean, it's definitely great to see these things and get more of the charity side of things going on.
Yeah, it's one of those things that has always been hard for companies to really do up until recently. With streaming, people can like put up awesome
Hmm.
content. They've got a bunch of watchers that they viewers that they can attract and give a couple bucks here and there. And I know in your business, there's a lot of people that's how you make a living. And if you told me 10 years ago that people would be making a living doing YouTube videos, that would have blown my mind.
Yeah.
But that's not a thing, is it? But yeah, it's the new like MTV. It's what the kids are doing now, and I hate saying that again because it totally dates me. But yeah, all these stars coming out of YouTube and Twitch, and it's in podcasting, and it's just very cool to see this new medium really taking off. It's a medium that to be able to live through this kind of new thing, coming to life in a time where that kind of stuff just did not was pretty stale. Like TV and radio was it for a very long time.
Hmm.
And then video games started to include some advertising and that kind of thing. But yeah, getting these reviewers, having a games TV channel, and just tons of content out there on the internet,
Yeah.
uh, it's a great thing.
Yeah. I will say though, as someone trying to break in now, it has certainly gotten a lot harder to do that today. And I mean, again, I think the golden time was like 2007, 2008. That was when a lot of the people who sort of have become the mainstays, I think, have really shown up. Like Markiplier, Northern Lion, Total Biscuit,
Hmm.
PewDiePie, and again, we can go on with naming people. But I mean, I'm slowly but surely getting there. I hope that at some point, when people say, "Oh, my game took off," it was all thanks to Josh and Game Wiz. I'm waiting for that day to happen. But I
Yeah.
mean, hopefully, it will happen soon. I mean, we are just knocking on the door of 1,000 right now at the stream. So
Oh, that's cool.
I'm hoping that it will get there.
Um, and yeah, you will. I mean, the fact is, you having a supreme, like a very high level of knowledge of the history of games,
Hmm.
of the current games that are out there, and having talked to all these indie developers
Hmm.
and even higher, like AAA developers and designers, like that kind of experience is hard to come by. Most of the time, it's a lot of opinions. But
Hmm.
to have that factual knowledge is great to be able to draw on, and that's the kind of thing that attracts people like me. Um, just
Hmm.
hearing that and being able to relate to a lot of it, it's a rare thing, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's definitely hard to like prove that knowledge these days because again, thanks to the internet, everyone is able to do it, and it becomes that much harder to stand out. And again, that takes us back with the independent market, as you've talked about multiple times on the cast, Rob. These days, you just need an understanding of programming. You can pick up an engine like Unity or even something like Game Maker or RPG Maker, and you can make a game.
Yeah,
But so can several hundred, even several thousand other people in the world who can do the same thing.
yeah,
And it becomes that much harder to say, okay, this is my game, and this is why you should play my game, as opposed to all this other stuff out there at the same time.
yeah. Bluebird's got a little bit of content there,
Hmm.
weighing in. Certainly, it is so tough, and I wish you the best of luck,
Hmm.
because it would be cool for me to say, yeah, I was on that guy's show way back when. But yeah, I think you have a solid shot, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with it.
Yeah. And again, you never know. I mean, I will say this 2016 in terms of growth has definitely been, I think, biggest in terms of getting my name out there. And a lot of it has been from the social media side. I mean, at the start of this year, I was down to, I think I had like 20, 30 followers on Twitter. Right now I'm at just over 830
Nice.
subscribers. And again, the YouTube channel, I mean, a year and a half ago I had like 5. And my friend was like, you're not going to get 100 subscribers. What do you think? And then I got them like, now the goal is 500. You're never going to get to 500. And then I'm like, okay, now the next goal is 1,000. 1,000, that's a lot of people. How are you going to get to that number? Now we're doing it. And again, it's just about that kind of constant growth and being able to prove yourself that you are essentially worthy of being followed, or you're worthy of your information. And
And
it's hard out there.
real quick, we got looks like Ty HD from YouTube just asking what we're doing. You can describe it. It's your podcast. It's your Twitch. So it's a good question.
We are talking about pretty much all manner of game design topics right now. This is Robert Leach from Voyage. I'm Josh Bycer from Game Wisdom, and we have been talking about. I've forgotten at this point the number of topics we've talked
So
about.
many things. Game history, a bunch of the indie games that are out there, AAA games, UI. We covered a lot of ground here today.
Yeah, and if you're for anyone watching this who are just coming on for YouTube, I mean, I'm sorry, on for Twitch, this will be archived on my YouTube channel, Game Wisdom, probably in like a week or so from this actual stream. So you can watch us all as many times as you would choose.
Very cool.
But yeah, it's definitely an interesting point. Like what Bluebird is saying, it's becoming more important to get the streamers and the YouTubers as opposed to the general press. I mean,
Yeah.
there's been so many talks about the death of the newspaper industry and all that kind of thing. Oh, oh, tied.
Oh, tired. I apologize.
But it's becoming a lot hard again to get your name out there and get that kind of information going, because again, if you're not able to get your name out there, I mean, this goes back to what we said earlier. The games that have succeeded the most in the independent space and even in the AAA space has had that constant positive feedback loop.
Hmm.
You get your game gets picked up by Total Biscuit, who then that work gets out to a site like Polygon or Rock Paper Shotgun, who then gets it out to IGN or GameSpot. And then that builds you up so more people hear about it, and they're going to talk about your game. And in many cases, like stuff like The Darkest Dungeon or Prison Architect, you pretty much earn your profit before your game is even out, just thanks to word of mouth. And again, Darkest Dungeon has like the quintessential poster boy for excellence in Kickstarter campaigns due to everything that they did right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting field, and like you say, it can always spark and just go nuts, and sometimes you fall through the cracks, and that's just life in the indie games business.
Hmm. And again, if we wanted to, we could easily jump to that topic easily. But yeah, I think we are quickly approaching an hour and a half. I think we are going to start to wrap things up. My voice is going to be dying soon, and I have
Same
one
here.
more podcast for tomorrow for this week.
Oh,
So, and I have to do streaming tonight. I just saw that the Resident Evil 7 demo has been updated, so now
ooh.
I gotta jump on that and check that out. But again, Rob, it has been a pleasure hanging out with you this fine afternoon. And again, if you're ever free in the future, love to have you on. Um,
Oh gosh, yeah, love to be back.
like I said at the start, for those of you watching this either live or recorded, this was sort of like a special impromptu time for our weekly discussions. Usually our time is about 7:30, 8 o'clock EST on Thursdays on Twitch. So if you're ever free for a time like that, I would love to have you on. Or we can always have one of these afternoon casts whenever you're free.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I mean, being on your podcast and now on your stream is just, it's always great. I love talking about this
Yeah,
stuff and learning and just kind of going back and forth. It's a lot of fun.
awesome. All right, so I think with that, we'll wrap things up. Do you have any final plugs or anything you would like to say before we say goodnight?
Yeah, just to repeat, 12 Days of Indie, we're going to be showcasing Alyssa, or AP, aka Bluebird. Bluebird Plays. She's going to be doing Venture Forth Tuesday morning on the East Coast. It's Tuesday morning at midnight. or Monday night at midnight, depending on how you look at it. And then the West Coast, obviously 9 o'clock. So I'll be tuning in. I'll be on chat. Jeremy, the developer, is going to be on chat. So we're excited about that. 12 Days of Indie, great. Doing donations for Toys for Tots, so it's a great cause. And then Venture Forth launches in mid-January for $9.99 on sale from $14.99.
Mm-hmm. And of course, in coming in January, you're going to sort of announce your next game and Kickstarter too.
That is correct. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that because that's an exciting game. We're going to post a demo of it right away. Itch.io, that's the name of the website. So that's what we're going to be doing, and I'm looking forward to that too.
Awesome. All right. Well, Rob, I think we're going to say goodnight. If you wouldn't mind hanging on Skype for like a minute or two after we end the stream, I just want to talk to you a little bit off. But that is going to do it. So, for those of you who've been catching this live or recorded, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed things, of course, be sure to like and subscribe and all that great stuff. It helps out. Be sure to check out the games from Indie Voyage on Steam now. That includes, of course, Zavix Tower and Venture Forth. If you haven't watched them yet, be sure to check out the Building the Game segments on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel. There is that specific playlist. That's where I hung out with Chris Macaulay and Jeremiah Ingham of their respective games. We did, I think, a good hour or so talking about their games and playing them. And Rob, I'll be sure to stop in and say hi whenever I do one of my streams again or while I'm playing some games.
Yeah, definitely. I tried to get in the other night, but I was in the middle of on a call with a friend of mine, so I could only watch. But I will certainly come in and join the chat in the future.
Awesome. All right. So, with all that said, once again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. And that was Robert Leach from Indie Voyage. So, have a great night. I'm going to be ending the stream here. And like I said, if you're enjoying this on YouTube, thanks for tuning in there. And if you would like to catch more videos like these, I do my daily vlog, A Critical Thought, on YouTube. And like I said, Game Wisdom Live is most weeks, or it should be scheduled to about 7:30, 8 o'clock EST, right here on Twitch. So, again, have a great rest of the day, and we will see you all next time. Take care.